Grow where you're planted. Have you heard that phrase, grow where you're planted? Sometimes it said bloom where you're planted. A quote attributed to St. Francis de Sales, a Renaissance-era Catholic bishop. It's something to which many of us aspire, I think, to thrive because of, or perhaps more often despite our circumstances. Today marks our Hanukkat Habayit, our Renovation Celebration, and also the beginning of a process that will conclude when we return to this building this coming fall for Hanukkat Habayit Part 2, The Gathering. 44 years ago, we were planted here in Reservoir Hill, and for the next several months will be transplants, cuttings meant to sprout new leaves and buds, and then we'll return to bloom here once more. In some ways, our journey will be the inverse of the original Hanukkat Habayit, the rededication of the temple for which Hanukkah is named. In that instance, the Seleucid Greeks chased our ancestors from their home, desecrated their altar, and imposed draconian policies, severing observant Jews from their sacred rituals. Our story is precisely opposite. We leave willingly, with some trepidation perhaps, but with the knowledge that we will most certainly return. And when we do return, we'll be stronger as a community, with a space more beautiful and useful, and with renewed sense of purpose. The first Hanukkah was a time of great suffering, pain, and uncertainty. Victory came at great cost. Beth Am's first Hanukkah was a time of joy, but also a time of uncertainty. What was possible for an urban synagogue in 1970s Baltimore City? Would the ambitious and perhaps audacious experiment find its footing? This Hanukkah, there's still a bit of uncertainty, I have to admit. What exactly will the coming months mean for us? Which of our members will step forward to help us fund or close our funding gap? But 44 years after our founding, our questions are less about survival and more about how to build on our past, how to grow and bloom where we're planted. All right, I've been here for well over 8 years now, so I think it's time to test whether anyone has been paying attention. What was the topic of the very first sermon that I gave from this pulpit? All right, good, perfect. So that means for the next 8 years, I'll be just repeating sermons that I gave the previous 8. Excellent. It was my audition sermon, and it was about community. I shared the story of Choni HaMa'agel, Choni the circle drawer, who was the original Rip Van Winkle. He sees an old man planting a carob tree. He challenges him harshly. What good is it to plant a tree that won't bear fruit for 70 years? You'll be dead long before that. And the old man replies, there were carob trees in the world before I arrived. Someone planted those trees, so I plant this tree for my children and for my grandchildren. And then the story takes a dark turn, with Choni falling asleep and awakening 70 years later in a generation to which he doesn't belong. He dies a bitter death, bereft and lonely. O chavruta, o mituta, the Talmud concludes with shades of Patrick Henry, give me friendship or give me death. So I gave that sermon and I talked about the life-giving power of community, and somehow you were convinced to hire me because you assumed that I was talking about you. About this community, you know, the one that feels like home. And I was. And I wasn't. All right, confession time. I gave a version of that same sermon to 2 other shuls. I can tell you this now because I'm at the beginning of a contract, you see. I know, but hey, look, we didn't know each other that well yet. I wasn't ready for a long-term commitment. How was I to know that you were the one When I spoke to those other shuls, it didn't mean anything. In all seriousness, the sermon was, of course, about what I hoped to find, and also to assess, well, what I could help to build. Because here's the thing, the story of Choni HaMa'agel isn't only about the future, it's also about the past. In fact, I would argue this is, at its core, a story about how the past informs the future, how long-term vision is a byproduct of careful investment, how attentiveness to history and cultural norms is a recipe for future success. You well know, I didn't call Beth Am the house of the people. You did. Or Etta Kaplan did. And guess what I discovered that weekend in late 2009? Actually, it is. On Shabbat Hanukkah in 1987, 31 years ago, our beloved Ephraim Potts, Zichrono Livracha, said the following from this bima. At Beth Am's first service, one of the tenets of the Beth Am philosophy we felt essential to our success was that we would be a do-it-yourself congregation. While external pressures on people's lives have, over the years, he continued, affected our ability to continue to be a do-it-yourself shul, I hope our leadership hasn't given up on the other goals. Those goals included responding to the needs of a, quote, modern, active, interested, involved, young American Jewish family that was being turned off by indifference, lack of warmth, and inflexibility of large institutions, as well as using traditions to, quote, enrich the Jewish experience of our members. Ephraim charged the congregation and its leadership. These, of course, are ongoing dynamic goals that must be continually strived for, he said. They are moving targets, so that it is necessary that we continually adjust our sights to fulfill our reason for existence. God, I miss him. Ephraim had this uncanny ability to stand exactly on the spot that Choni couldn't. He understood the past, both Chizuk Emuna's and Beth Am's and Baltimore's and American Jewry's. He understood the need to grow and adapt to changing circumstances. Ephraim and Debbie Potts and the founding and early members of the shul, many of whom you saw are here today, made possible my success such as it is. And Cantor Ira's success, and Rabbi Kelly's and David Rothenberg's success, Lisa Aksh and Jonathan Fishman's success. Each lay and professional leader of Beth Am flourishes because you, they, and of course, Dr. Kaplan prepared us for this moment. In other words, the Choni story is a bit less about the tree and more about the soil. Carob trees can only bear fruit if the seed germinates, the saplings have sufficient water, and the climate is hospitable. 70 years later isn't a given. I don't know why you chose me, but I know why Miriam and I chose Beth Am, because we saw not first and foremost what I as a rabbi could plant, but what I didn't have to. At Beth Am, I discovered an orchard planted by others. There was some pruning to be done. It was a bit thick with weeds in places. Yes, I added a few programmatic saplings of my own, though the ones that have done well have only done so because you all helped to keep them fed and watered. And that's why our Beth Am at Task Force is working so hard to fill our time away from this building, 2501 Utah Place, with exciting opportunities for growth and connection. And why IFO is continuing to work to deepen our relationships with our neighbors here in Reservoir Hills so that they will be there and even be better when we return. And why our Social Action Committee is pursuing new opportunities for volunteerism and walking a path of justice. And why our KUSY and pre-Kadima youth group activities and Shabbat is Awesome, Tat Shabbat, are booming and will continue this year. And Jewish Discovery Lab, and adult learning opportunities like Melton and the Lunch and Learn, and Beth Am Chicks and Wise Aging, and a new women's Rosh Chodesh group, and reimagining of Bayit, and so much more. Beth Am will flourish. And yes, on this Hanukkah and many more to come, will continue to shine. We learned 44 years ago, grow where you're planted, shine where you're lit. And in that way, this moment is exactly like the original Hanukkah. It's a moment of rededication, of reaffirmation of our founding principles, of thick learning and deep community, of meaningful tefillah and real attentiveness to even the most inscrutable and daunting challenges of urban society. And that's why the metaphor of the menorah is so potent on Hanukkah. These candelabras represent not just the ritual of a bygone era, but a sort of lesson plan, if you will, for successful Jewish living. You see, Hanukkah takes place not accidentally during the darkest time of year, near the winter solstice. Rabbeinu Bachya, the 13th century Spanish sage, notices something curious about the interplay of light and dark. Ha'or doche harbe min hachoshech. Even a little light can dispel a great deal of darkness. Noam Tzion, Lainey's nephew, who has been to Beth Am many times, points out that this doesn't mean all of the darkness. He says this is not a holiday that celebrates the end of darkness. It's a holiday that celebrates the beginning of a struggle to increase light precisely at a time of tremendous darkness. Matityahu and Yehuda Maccabee began that struggle, but it took, 25 years for the Jews to regain full independence in the 2nd century before the Common Era. Chevra, in a few weeks, we'll be leaving this building temporarily at a time when many of us experience the world as one of growing darkness. Hanukkah reminds us to keep things in perspective. The seasons turn, the moon waxes and wanes, political situations degrade and improve. The trick is to keep lighting candles, to keep building meaningful relationships and developing purposeful communities like this one. Because in the end, darkness, it can't hold a candle to those of us armed with menorahs ablaze. The success of the enterprise we call Beth Am has not always proceeded in a straight line. There have been fits and starts, there have been terrific successes and some real disappointments along the way. But these menorot that were kindled 96 years ago and rededicated in 1974, they continue to shine. The anthropologist Margaret Mead is said to have said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." 44 years ago, a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens created Beth Am Synagogue. They planted a tree in a fertile orchard that was this historic building. It, thank God, did not take 70 years to bear fruit. Each of us gathered today are a testament to that, but we do need to tend the orchard and rededicate ourselves to a 21st century version of Jewish thriving. I've always said Beth Am is a startup, the anti-shul dressed up like a somewhat proper synagogue. That is our strength. That's how we'll continue to strike the moving targets we must to, according to Ephraim, fulfill our reason for existence. At this watershed moment in our proud history, we look backward and we look forward. We look back at a bold and successful experiment. We look forward to a fruitful, flourishing, and bright horizon. Bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh, in those days, and in this time as well, says the Hanukkah liturgy. And the Siddur adds, Or chadash al Tzion ta'ir. A new light will shine in Zion, v'niskeh chulanu me'era le'oro, and may we all soon be worthy of its illumination. Shabbat Shalom. Chanukah Sameach Chodesh Tov. May we all go from strength to strength.